because this is like really important stuff, and it's going to make sense why we're taking the approach we're doing. It's all really rooted in a justification and a reason and something that's really been well thought out. Because if we take what we know about how the brain evolves based on repetition and highly emotional experiences, that can happen both on the negative and the positive end, emotionally speaking. So, high repetition or high frequency negative experiences create something akin to trauma, maladaptive behavioral patterns, and coping mechanisms. To heal, we need the opposite. High emotionally charged experiences on the positive end. And what those new experiences do in a new environment with new people, when you're out of your old environment that's associated with your old way of being, that exercises new neural pathways. And the more you can exercise those new neural pathways, the more the old pathways fade away and you stop defaulting to them. This is rewiring the brain. This leads to change. So, if you remember from the Altered States workshop, I did go over my story, but I'll quickly touch on it again, just as a refresher. So, I've got a background in physical fitness. Um, Before that, I was a bit of a drama kid, a theater kid. My parents are professional clowns, and this really did come into play. Yeah, that's right, it's true. They do kids' parties rather than a circus, but yeah, grew up with unicycles and juggling balls and magic tricks all over the house, costumes. This would come into play later as I started touring Altered States as a bit of a ringleader kind of character. But as I went, through high school and finished high school, I decided I wanted to help people get healthy because lifting weights was really healthy and positive for me. That was actually in pursuit of being a professional wrestler. That was my first childhood dream to be a pro wrestler, like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And I pursued that. I actually went to Sydney and was doing the local circuit of pro wrestling, very theatrical and physical. Um, Again, this style of entertainment would come into play with Altered States. So, theater kid to pro wrestler, lifted weights to be a pro wrestler, found that it was really beneficial to become healthy and strong. Decided I'd be a personal trainer because there's no way you could make a living at the time being a pro wrestler in Australia. So I lifted weights and started helping people get healthy. But what I found was that there were lots of different ways to lose weight, um, but not all of them were healthy. And that was my distinction between weight loss and getting healthy. There is some crossover, of course, but they are very, very different. And I decided that it boils down to values. It was like, okay, well, what's the best way to, lose weight in a healthy way? So down the rabbit hole I went, looking at all different programs. And, I say this at the workshop that a lot of the exercise programs never really led to the lasting change we really wanted, even when it was really well informed. Same with nutrition, there was still a bit more to it. And that's when I discovered the power of habits. And I worked out that habits like compound interest that accumulate across time, habits like a river that cuts through stone, not with power, but with persistence. And the definition of a habit is a thought or behavior that has been repeated enough across time to become programmed below a level of conscious awareness. Turns out it was the things my clients were doing repeatedly across time, often without even realizing, that was determining their long-term health, whether it was scrolling before bed or, snacking on junk food or whatever it might be. And now, what I learned about habits, and this was my doorway to the unconscious workings of the mind, and I learned about how the mind develops and how we become who we are. And what I learned was that what motivates us habitually, how we habitually think and behave, is rooted in our feelings. Because as humans, we're emotional creatures. Emotions have survival information. As you learn about the brain and nervous system, it's all about survival. And that which is most emotionally charged has the most survival information. So whatever could most easily eat us conjures the most fear in us. That would be in reference to a predator. And positive emotions are associated with that which is life affirmative. So it might be a tribe or food, things of that nature. And I say this because as the nervous system and brain is developing as we're quite young, it's these emotionally charged experiences that kind of get logged in the brain and help us navigate the world because we want to avoid that which we've encountered that was terrifying and negative, uncomfortable, and move towards that which is positive. The thing is, sometimes these wires can get crossed and we get stuck with these really negative emotions in our body that are driving our behavior. And then we go to that which is life affirmative to basically soothe and uplift our mood. Does this make sense? So this is how we end up developing habitual behaviors that elevate our mood and can cause side effects, hangovers, and come downs. For some people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's junk food. For some people, it's scrolling. For some people, it's exercise. So what I've found over my journey is that a lot of people have their coping mechanisms, which you may call addictions, even in certain contexts. But what they're all motivated by is feelings, and you could adopt a more socially acceptable coping mechanism, but that doesn't mean that you're free. You know what I mean? And what I found was a lot of people they love the gym, they love exercise, but what happens when you go without that? Well, there's no negative emotions come up. So, in my view, the best way to operate and what we should be aiming at is to heal. And then that is associated with feelings of freedom. And then we're not driven to alter our mood because we feel okay with ourselves. And that's healing, that's homecoming, that's beautiful. But as far as how what you need to know about the brain, it gets shaped by emotions that informs habits, and then it forms a path of least resistance that we default to without thinking. This is how we make our way back to habits. And the way I conceptualize the way the brain is formed, and the way I like to look at this through brain science, because it's ground zero for thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It's almost like we are a car and the brain's the engine under the hood. So when we look at the brain and nervous system, which is, the electrical activity that underpins how we think, feel, and behave, there's no changing behavior or thoughts or feelings without changing the brain. Even if you take an approach that doesn't really incorporate neuroscience reliably, you will change the brain regardless. There's no changing without changing the brain. And what's beautiful about this is I'll eventually get to the role that spirituality can play in this. It doesn't have to play a role, but I've found that the best way to heal and evolve and grow is some type of spiritual awakening, the realization that there's some sort of higher power or spirit. And that can be whatever that looks like for you. It doesn't need to be a god as such. It could be your own inner power. But when you look at the literature, you look at Alcoholics Anonymous, all these people who have addictions and limitations and have given away their life for their addictions, they weren't able to break these habits. What did eventually help them heal and change and evolve and grow is some sort of awakening. But the way I describe the way the brain and nervous system develops, it's through repetition and highly emotional experiences. So repetition, you do things repeatedly, that will shape the brain. Then you can shape the brain with low repetition experiences that are highly emotionally charged. So it could be like thought of as consistency or intensity. And then consistent negative experiences at a low level, and then the occasional high negative experience equals something like trauma. You don't have to call it trauma, but I see trauma as simply as an environment that shaped the brain that led to maladaptive behavioral patterns. And then when you've got high intense, high frequency negative experiences, you've got complex trauma. This is like really important stuff, and it's going to make sense why we're taking the approach we're doing. It's all really rooted in a justification and a reason and something that's really been well thought out. Because if we take what we know about how the brain evolves based on repetition and highly emotional experiences, that can happen both on the negative and the positive end, emotionally speaking. So high repetition or high frequency negative experiences create something akin to trauma, maladaptive behavioral patterns and coping mechanisms. To heal, we need the opposite. High emotionally charged experiences on the positive end. And what those new experiences do in a new environment with new people, when you're out of your old environment that's associated with your old way of being, that exits new neural pathways. And the more you can exercise those new neural pathways, the more the old pathways fade away and you stop defaulting to them. This is rewiring the brain. This leads to change. So what the retreat is it's a place where you can exercise new neural pathways because you're in a new environment with new people, eating new food, having new experiences that are highly emotionally charged on the positive end. Part of that may involve discharging negative energy that's caught up in the body. So there might be a lot of releasing. There might be a lot of vulnerability and crying, and being held in a really safe and supportive environment. That can be really healing. But then we go do something that's really blissful, like the breath work, like the fire walking. We confront challenges like the ice bath, and we come out invigorated. And as you do things that just psych you up and go, oh my God, with your new tribe who you are feeling connected and safe with, oh my God, I'm feeling like myself again. I'm tapping into parts of myself that I thought I'd lost. So this is about having an experience. It's coming in and just for 4 days, 3 nights, having an experience where you're just opening yourself up to new things and letting go of the old. This is the high intensity but low frequency because it's a small period of time, and then we integrate. So all of you know now that we've got a 4 week integration program after the retreat, and this is when we turn that experience into a daily practice where it's low intensity, something sustainable, but something that will reinforce those new brain changes. And this is how you make change across time. You need the interruption, which is the high emotional experience, and the integration. Okay, it's highly emotional charge experience, then repetition. It's interesting, because when you look at how the brain works, it makes sense that emotionally charged experiences inform survival, um, and then your survival depends on keeping that thing in mind. That's trauma. You spend your whole life avoiding that negative experience, but then that negative experience suddenly becomes the center of your world just by avoiding it. So it's a bit of a paradox. But this is how we can heal and then we can reinforce. I find that if you do it without the highly charged emotional experience, you're just stacking good habits on top of bad habits, and then you're working against the biological tide because you haven't interrupted the old brain patterning. So it's like a biological tide of momentum that your body's defaulting to, and it's hard to swim against that tide. You need the interruption. And then you find people, and I'm no stranger to uh, expressing my passion for psychedelics and the mushrooms. You've been to the workshops. We're not going to be using any illegal substances at the retreat, but the same underlying brain pathways can be achieved with breath work, which most of you, if not all, have experienced at the workshop. But my point is that you find people that will use mushrooms to expand their consciousness, experience some relief, but then they'll fail to integrate, which means they don't see any lasting positive change. Then they turn into one of those people that just keeps eating mushrooms every couple of weeks. Like I actually haven't had too many psilocybin experiences myself, but I've been able to make some really positive change from the ones that I've had. So it's not about juicing as many oranges as you can. It's about how much juice can you get out of a single orange. This is the approach we take, and again, this is all about therapeutic benefits. We're not here to get high, and psilocybin being a legal drug is associated with that kind of culture, because of the legalities. But, it's all therapeutic as far as I'm concerned. In a therapeutic context, we should be able to speak openly about this. Thankfully, though, breathwork's available where we can just sort of do it with legal means. Anyhow, that's an overview. That's like a recap of the theory of brain development, how we get stuck in our patterns, and what the process is to change it, and avoiding the pitfalls of not interrupting regular brain patterning or integrating the interruption successfully. So when we've got the preparation program, the retreat, then the integration program, you're actually going to be taken through a program that's the result of 16 years of me searching for answers. And it's only been like in the like this year really. I've done retreats before, but this year I've started doing my own retreats where I'm kind of captain of the ship and I get to write the program and what we're doing, and it's working. And I'd like to share with you before we go and pass it around. I'm going to share with you some feedback I got from people who attended our February retreat, just so you can get excited about what's in store for you and the benefits this is going to bring about in your future. Um, so let's see. This is from Sarah. The Altered States Immersion Retreat truly changed my life. From the preparation program and online meet and greets to the incredible support from Josh, Jean, and all the other caring facilitators, I felt supported from day one. I pushed far beyond what I thought I was capable of, surrounded by amazing, like-minded people. The connections and breakthroughs were unreal. I'm still working with the integration program daily, sometimes 3 times a day, and it's been key to keeping the momentum going in everyday life. I can't wait to go back. So this is Sarah who's completed the like whole program, and really it's like an 8 week program or 7 week program. By the time we start prep, which is basically tonight, to the completion of the integration, it's like a 2 month program. Pretty cool. Um, this is from Grant. First and foremost, anyone who might be thinking about attending, take action and do it. I'll skip that bit. For myself, it was profoundly enjoyable and helped me unlock a part of myself I had forgotten about over the years. The setting for the retreat is amazing. The food was just perfect. I have nothing but amazing things to say about my experience, and the growth and expansion really takes hold in the integration experience following the retreat. Gene has really dedicated himself to the process, and you won't be disappointed. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So there's just two. I'll leave it there. The last thing I'll say, and I hope that you're finding value because I understand that I'm talking a lot, but hopefully this is building your confidence because that's my goal. I want you to know that it's not the blind leading the blind. I'm very passionate and believe very strongly in this approach, and I've got a lot of success to show for it. But the last thing I'll say is that the reason integration is so important is because of something called pendulation. Pendulation is a concept by Peter Levine, and it's this idea that when we confront what's holding us back, it's associated with an initial contraction because we're no longer ignoring the pain. We're no longer shying away from the parts of ourselves that we need to heal. So as we confront that, that can be associated with the contraction, negative emotion, feeling that. But as you confront that and grow through that and release and realize you're stronger than what you thought, that's associated with a expansion and you go further out than what you could. Then the nature of life is that as we go along, we contract again as life brings us hardships, but then we expand. The next thing comes around as it does in life, we contract, we expand. And as we go through these cycles, we can use the wisdom from previous contractions to navigate those storms. And what tends to happen is after a retreat, everyone's so expanded because they've just felt so much love for the first time. When that initial inevitable contraction occurs, people can think, "Oh my God, nothing's changed at all." And it's like, no, no, no. You've made space, but remember, it's also repetition, just not highly charged experiences. That's when your daily practice, which is part of the integration program, like a little bit of breath work every day, consistently with my support as we all go through it together, we start to go back out to that expansion. That becomes the new baseline. We can go further, and then it just keeps on. And that's like a lifestyle. That's a way of navigating life, is this constant growth, constant evolution, because life is yin and yang. We're never going to get to the point where we're without problems. We just get really wise on how to navigate them and know that there's meaning within them. And, ultimately it's going to be for our growth and betterment and help us help others. All right. Thank you for letting me express myself. I'm very passionate and just love to jump at the chance to really explain this stuff because I think it's worth hearing. I think it's very, very important stuff. If you don't know this stuff, you can walk into pits when you're trying to make positive change because you're not addressing the principles of how the brain works.
Five, four,